I have for years wanted to come to the Downtown Rotary Club and tell the story about my first week as, and I didn't know what a CEO was then, but the person in charge of Yakima Neighborhood Health Services. Just to sort of set the background, to kind of figure out how in the world I ever got there. I had come to Yakima in my frivolous youth and got married and had some kids and got divorced, and spent 14 years working for a remarkable man named Dr. Sherman Hill. And there probably aren't a lot of you who remember Dr. Hill, but for those that do, I can't imagine anybody would deny what a wonderful, wonderful human being he is. But after about 14 years, and he was hematology and oncology, a very new idea, new concept in the 60s. And our patients typically in hematology and oncology in the 60s didn't have long lives. And I, after 14 years, found that stressful and difficult, and I went to him one day and very tearfully told him that I was leaving healthcare forever. It was just too hard. And while I was trying to decide what to do, the city of Yakima and the Allied Arts and the Warehouse Theater Group, they had found the funds and the will to restore the Capitol Theater. And I had been a long time Warehouse Theater person, and we all, in those days, we all knew each other and we all had fun together, and what one did, we all did. So I spent my first year out of healthcare, my permanent exit from healthcare, at, in a very minor role, restoring the Capitol Theater. That's important later. As we brought Bob Hope in to help us with the grand opening, and there's few people in the room that remember Bob Hope Night, and my role at the Capitol Theater then was phasing out. And I had accepted a proposal for marriage, and I had accepted a job in Seattle, and I was leaving town. But it was summertime, and I didn't want to be too abrupt in this with my children, so we were going to phase out through the summer and move into Seattle. And of course, I had no income. Being the single mom, all of a sudden I'd taken this drastic step and quit my job, but still had a family to support. And I saw an ad in the paper one day that said this thing called Yakima Neighborhood Health Services wanted somebody to write a grant. And so I got in my car and I drove down there, and it's a pretty blighted looking street. And I go in, and here is what passes for a front desk, and it's 3 apple boxes stacked here with a door across them, and that was the front desk. And there's a woman up on a ladder, and she's dusting. And I introduced myself and that I'm here to apply for the job, to write a grant. Well, nobody else had shown up, so she said, sure, you can write a grant. So I got busy and I wrote that grant, had it ready, and took it to the city council. And they, of all the outrageous things, they said no. And so I was stunned and shocked and didn't know if I was going to get my $200 because I'd been unsuccessful. Went back, and a board member, and this is 1979, the clinic was, the organization was formed in 1975. And this woman, who was the chair of the board, came to me and asked me if I would come to a board meeting that night. And I said, well, I have to pick my kids up, and this is important. My children were playing Team Yakima volleyball, my twin daughters, and I have to be there to pick them up at 7, but if I can be out of here in time to pick them up by 7, that'll be fine. So I did. I showed up at the board meeting at 5 o'clock, and the board were firing the founder of Yakima Neighborhood Health Services, and then asked me if I would be willing to help out while they figured out what they were going to do. That's Monday night, and this is where the story begins. So I didn't know any better, and I said, sure, I could do that, for a few days. I'd be happy to hang in here while you figure it out. But there were patients scheduled the next day, and I didn't have a clue what I was going to do. So that night following this, I went to pick my girls up, and Dr. Gail Brewer, some of you would know, was the founder and my girls' coach, and Jim Lust, who later became Judge Jim, were my girls' coaches. So I told them I had this strange thing, and I had done a ton of fundraising for Team Yakima, so those guys owed me. And and they said, well, sure, take the girls home, get them settled, and meet us at Little John's and we'll have a beer. And so, yeah, well, how could I turn that down? And so we get down to Little John's, I tell them all about it, and Gail Brewer says to me, Anita, do you know a doctor named Dr. Corcoran? And I said, sure, because in those days, if we didn't all know each other, right, Doug? If we didn't all know each other, we thought we knew each other. And so he said, well, he has this thing called a family practice residency, and I would suggest you call him first thing in the morning. I'll bet there's something you guys could do together. Well, I had no idea what I had no idea what a family practice residency was, but if Gail said it was a good idea and Jim supported him, I was okay. Next morning, 8 o'clock, I call, and Doug isn't in. He's making rounds or something. Who knows what doctors did in those days. And, but he'd call back. At 8:15, I called again. Well, he wasn't in yet, but they'd be sure to have him call back. At 8:30, I called again. And they finally put me through. And I introduced myself, and I said, do you know me? And I started rattling off about what was going on and that I had patients scheduled and everything. You said to me, no, Anita, I don't think I know who you are. And then you paused and you said, and I'm not really quite sure what you're asking for. And then you paused and you said, I can't get down there until 11 o'clock, Anita. Can you handle things until I get there? And at 11 o'clock, you came down, you saw those 5 or 6 patients, and I know it was not more than 6 patients. And then we went off in this little space that I was calling an office, and you said to me, do you know Patty Nagel? I said, no, and you said, well, I'm going to have Patty Nagel give you a call this afternoon, and I want you to get together with her this evening. And so I called Patty Nagel, and so Patty and I get together that night. She comes up with this whole idea. Together we cook it up, and there might have been a beer or a glass of wine in there somewhere. We cook up this idea, and she said she would take it back to you. She called the next morning, and this is what you had agreed to. You had agreed that these family practice residents, whatever they were, I didn't know. As long as they were called doctor, I was happy. We would do a rotation. And that Dr. Frank LeCoq, and I want you to really connect this with Downtown Rotary. So first we've got Doug Corcoran, Dr. Frank LeCoq, Dr. Don McGinnis, and Doug would be there to precept and oversee while these young docs rotated through this place. It was a living room, 2 bedrooms, and a pantry was what we had, and a sink falling off the wall. And you had her ask me if I knew what a physician assistant was. Not a clue, not a clue. It was a brand new concept in 1979. And you had a woman named Ellen Harder that you wanted me to meet. You remember, don't you? And so I'm on a roll. It's only Tuesday. I tell you, it's Wednesday morning. I've got something called family practice residents that are going to rotate through. I've got Dr. Frank LeCoq. I've got Don McGinnis. I've got this physician assistant thing is cooking, and it's Wednesday. Okay. So what I didn't have was money. So while I was working at the Capitol Theater, I had become very well acquainted with a man who became very dear with my family and friends named Bill Paddock. Now, Bill Paddock was the architect that helped with the reconstruction of the Capitol Theater, and I'm not going to go into everything in this town that Bill Paddock helped build. But anyway, Bill Paddock had talked to me incessantly about this thing called Rotary. So I called Bill Paddock, and he said to me, I'm on the finance committee at Downtown Rotary, and we meet tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock. So you figure out what you need, and you be there at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. Okay. So I'm up all night because, first of all, I don't know what I need. I don't know what to ask for. And I don't know what Rotary is. So off I go, and we're meeting in the hotel over here. And so this is how it played out. There was Bill Paddock that I had worked with at the Capitol Theater on the committee. John Sears, who my children's father had employed for a number of years. Max Vincent, who was my divorce lawyer. And a couple of other guys I don't recall right now. And ladies, they were all guys. And so through the night, what I had decided I was going to ask for, and in 1979, this was a real ask, I asked for $10,000 and 3 Rotarians for my board. And they excused me, and I went back across the street, and I got the call that day that the Downtown Rotary would give me $10,000 and that you would give me 3 Rotarians. Now, the 3 Rotarians were Bill Paddock from the Capitol Theater, my divorce lawyer, Max Vincent, and a man I didn't know, Ralph Coffey, who ultimately, this is another story and we don't have time for it, but he donated a car to us, and we raffled off tickets at $1 a piece. My children and 2 other people, and I sold 10,228. That number, I can't tell you what my budget at the clinic is this morning, but I can tell you how many of those tickets I sold. But that came later. Ralph Coffey and John Fairbrook, and John Fairbrook became really a guiding star for me. He stayed probably for about 6 years, 6 or 7, maybe a little bit longer on the board. And he was the one, when I would get wild and crazy ideas, he was the one board member who would always rein me in. And I wasn't always appreciative of that, but he did, and was a wonderful. So now, it's Thursday night. I have an OB/GYN, I have a pediatrician, I have docs, I have $10,000, I have 3 new board members from the Downtown Rotary Club. Who said healthcare is hard? It's easy. I get up the next morning, I'm going off, I'm pretty full of myself. I think, girl, you got it. I walk in, I get settled down in this little corner that is my office, and the young woman, the young CETA worker who's working at that interesting front desk comes in and she says, "There's 3 gentlemen here from Olympia who want to talk to you." And I said, "Okay." So I walk out, and there's 3 men there, and they've all got suits and ties on. And I'm a farm girl from North Idaho. When you saw a man in a suit and tie, you were going to a wedding, a funeral, or to church. And not only did they have suits and ties on, they were carrying briefcases, and they were from Olympia. And I'm telling you, my heart was pounding. And so they came in, and they started in about inappropriate billing. I didn't even know what that was, and that they wanted to see the books. I gave them everything I had, and they went in a corner, and at the end of the day, or towards the middle of the afternoon, they came in and they wanted $10,000. And I just panicked. So I get off in a little corner. Of course, it was 1979. There's no cell phones or anything. So I get off in a little corner, and I kind of hide, and I call Max Vincent. And I said, "Max, there's 3 men here from Olympia, and they want my $10,000. And Max says to me, "Anita, they're not getting your expletive deleted $10,000. And it was an expletive that I had, frankly, never heard before. He said, "You tell them that you've just talked to your lawyer, and would you please, and that we will be in touch, and then walk them to the front door." Okay. So 3 men in suits with briefcases, and I guide them to the door. And then Max calls back, "Are they gone?" And I said, "Yes." He says, "Can you go to Olympia on Monday?" I said, "Yes." "Why?" And he says, don't worry about it. I'll pick you up at 7 a.m. So off we go on Monday morning. We go to Olympia, And the person who's in charge of what would now be the equivalent of DSHS and Medicaid funding was Dr. Harlow Skinner, downtown Rotary. And Dr. Harlow Skinner, as it happened, had, when he was in private practice, had the office across the street from Dr. Hill. And I needed a second job, and one can't be a single mom and have a second job or you're never going to see your kids. And so Dr. Skinner was kind enough to let me do a lot of his dictation. So every night at 5 o'clock or whenever I got off, I would go to his office. I would pick up all the dictation for the day, and in those days it was all on tape and one thing another. And then I would take it home, and after the kids went to bed, I did that. So we had, for many years, had that working relationship, and he had been very supportive of me. Max says to Dr. Skinner, "Come on, this is Rotary money. You know Anita, I know Anita, come on, called him Hal, come on. And do not let this leave this room. This is highly confidential." Right. But that $10,000 was forgiven. And I can tell you, as somebody who works with public funds, in 2017, I would be on the front page of the Herald Republic and the Seattle paper and so on and so forth. But anyway, all was forgiven, came back. So I still had my $10,000. And then Max says to me on the trip back, he says, "What do you know about the United Way?" Max and John Fairbrook and somebody else took me over to meet Bill Baker, another downtown Rotarian, Bill Baker, and the United Way then agreed to put in front of their allocation committee immediately a request for funds, and ultimately this comes after the 8 days. They did give us $20,000 a year. Doug stuck with me for 2.5 years while we figured it all out. The grant that I tried to write for HUD did get funded later. We joined those two funny little houses together and created 4 exam rooms. And I don't know if you remember this, Doug, but you were buying some new equipment and you saw to it that I had the furniture I needed, the exam tables that I needed. You saw to it that I had my first set of scales. You saw to it that it looked like a community health center should look. And that was the first 8 days. It was a crazy rodeo, but within 8 days, we had health care, we had a little bit of money in the bank to get started, and it's all because the downtown Rotary stepped up. And so I came across this, thinking about you, Doug, and thinking about the Rotary Club, and Bill and John and Max and so many others. And I found this. And this is something that I've used a lot over time, but it just fits here so well. And it is a definition of the word commitment. Commitment is what transforms a promise into reality. It is the words that speak boldly of your intentions and the actions which speak louder than words. It is making time when there is none. It's coming through time after time, year after year after year. Commitment is the stuff character is made of, the power to change the face of things. It is the daily triumph of integrity over skepticism. And that is what I would say about you, Doug Corcoran. Because of you, and your fellow Rotarians, but specifically because of you, that little clinic that looked like that in 1979 looks more like this in 2017, and that is only one of 9 sites. And had you not been willing to step forward that day with no notice, even though you couldn't get there until 11 o'clock, you saw 5 or 6 patients that day. Today, I checked the registers, and today, on May 25th, not a week, not a month, but today at Neighborhood Health, we will see 873 patients because this organization and you stepped forward. Thank you.